B37, Ju-52 Iron Annie. About 70 feet or 23 meters below the surface of the Black Sea off the coast of Ukraine, a diver and his team found something amazing. They managed to uncover the sunken wreckage of a Luftwaffe plane that had been lost since 1942. Originally, the team included photographer Andrei Nekrasov and had set out in search of different aircraft, a Ju-88. Instead, the Ju-52, Iron Annie, that they stumbled upon, would prove to be all the more fascinating. Ju-52s were used as transport planes by the German forces during World War II. The one found by Nekrasov and his team was in such good condition that it contained many artifacts from the people who had been on board at the time of its crash. Divers found, among other things, a pair of boots, a shaving brush and toothbrush, a pair of goggles, a suitcase, and some maps, which still retain their vibrant color after so long being under the water. They found a thermos flask onto which the owner had signed their name, Wichert, and a belt buckle with a Nazi insignia which had the word witch carved into the back. A sword belt with the name Crow was also found nearby, along with a cap that told them that one of the people on board had served in the Spanish Civil War. By using these items recovered from the wreck, the team was able to figure out what exactly had happened to the plane that they had discovered. On January 13, 1942, the Ju-52 had landed in Prahova, Romania to pick up its 9 passengers. Among those on board were Johann Wichert, whose belt and flask had been found, Karl Krook, likely the owner of the sword belt, and Oberstleutnant Beryl Axel Freiherr von Jena, who had served in the Spanish Civil War and was the likely owner of the cap. The plane was on its way to Nikolaev in Ukraine, which is where it was based as part of the 104th Transport Group. The journey would have been one that took place over land, but conditions on the day of the flight were so bad that the pilot, Lieutenant Horst Ringel, was essentially flying blind. The pilot did request permission to land in either Spartakovka, Russia, or Vygoda, Ukraine, but the aircraft never turned up at either of these two destinations and was not heard from again. That is, until its discovery almost 70 years later. The plane is in such good condition with its wings and propellers intact that the team believes that the pilot purposefully made a water landing. This would also be backed up by the fact that pairs of boots were left behind, as a protocol for an emergency water landing required soldiers to remove their footwear. However, the question still remains as to what happened to those on board the plane after it crash landed. They must have tried to swim for shore, but their fates are still unknown to this day. What do you think happened? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. 6. SS Thistlegorm. The SS Thistlegorm was a 384-foot or 128-meter long merchant ship that was built in 1940. Originally destined to be a merchant ship operating under the Scottish company Albin Line, she completed deliveries and trades to the US, Argentina, and the West Indies. Fate would change, however, when SS Thistlegorm was drafted to help with a war effort and tasked with resupplying the British 8th Army fighting in World War II. She was quickly equipped with a 120mm anti-aircraft gun and a heavy-caliber machine gun back in Glasgow, before heading out for Alexandria to avoid the heavy number of ships fighting in the Mediterranean. SS Thistlegorm was awaiting passage through the Suez Canal when disaster struck. On October 6, 1941, 2 German bombers that had been returning from a failed bombing mission decided instead to drop their bombs on the dock where the Thistlegorm was moored. The bombs ripped through into the cargo hold where the ammunition was stored, setting off an explosion that ripped the vessel apart, causing it to sink within 10 minutes of being struck. Thankfully, despite the catastrophic damage to the SS Thistlegorm, only 9 souls lost their lives. This was thanks to the heroic endeavors of those on board the HMS Carlisle, which was waiting alongside it and successfully evacuated most of her crew. 15 years after her tragic sinking, the wreck of the SS Thistlegorm was discovered by renowned diver Jacques Cousteau in 1956. Despite this, the wreck remained a local secret until the 1990s. when divers started to realize just what an amazing sight she was to dive. Not only is the wreck itself a true marvel, split into two from the force of the explosion that sank the ship, but it allows divers access to the treasure trove that is her cargo hold. Motorcycles destined for use by soldiers and trucks can be found in almost pristine condition, despite the marine life that grows on them, with many still having intact tires. Boots sat ready for the feet of frontline soldiers to be dotted about the wreck, along with rifles and ammunition to be used in the fight. However, the most famous items at the wreck site aren't actually found inside the SS Thistlegorm, but are located a short distance away from it. 2 locomotive engines were being transported on the ship, but were thrown clear of the wreck by the sheer power of the explosion which sank her. Today, despite her sad history, the SS Thistlegorm is the most popular dive site in the world. Would you ever want to dive the SS Thistlegorm, or have you already taken the plunge? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. 5. The Felicity Ace. In 2022, a cargo ship ended up sending many people's dream cars to a watery grave. The Felicity Ace was carrying an assortment of luxury cars like Porsche, Lamborghini, and Bentleys from their respective factories in Germany to the US when a fire broke out on board. The stricken ship called out for help and managed to receive support from Portugal, who sent out vessels to tow it into port for repairs and to put out the fire on board. Unfortunately, the ship was unable to make it safely to the closest dock on the island of Fayal. It began to list on its starboard side while under tow, as the movement caused water to quickly flood into the hull. The vessel sank when it was 250 miles or 402 kilometers away from the Portuguese Azores Island, at a depth of 30,000 feet, 9,144 meters, making it and its valuable cargo unsalvageable. Thankfully, all the crew on board had been airlifted to safety, but the sinking was still a blow for the German automotive companies, as well as those in the US who were patiently awaiting the arrival of their luxury vehicles. As for the cause of the fire, it is heavily believed that it could have been started by a lithium battery in one of the cars that the Felicity Ace was transporting, as it had on board a combination of electric and non-electric vehicles. But as the ship has sunk, this can't fully be confirmed. In terms of the total loss, the car companies involved refuse to say, although it's believed to have put them out of pocket by a staggering $155 million. 4. Kamagen Underwater Cemetery. The island of Kamagen in the Philippines has a strange statue of a cross standing in the middle of the sea. However, it's what this cross represents that is the most fascinating. In 1870, the volcano of Kamagen, Mount Vulcan, erupted so violently that it took the capital city of the island as well as its cemetery under the waves. In remembrance of this tragedy, a large cross was erected on the water to remember the dead, both in the cemetery and from the sunken city itself. Today, visitors from all over the world come to Kamagen to see this amazing structure, which can be accessed by boat. Those who do often say they feel a sense of sadness and loneliness from standing there, especially as the base of the cross offers views across to the volcano that caused such destruction. You can also dive to the site of the Kamagen cross, and although you might not be able to see much, for a cemetery and memorial, it is teeming with underwater marine life. 3. Roman trading ships. In 2009, archaeologists made an amazing discovery off the coast of Ventotene in Italy. Lying at a depth of 328 feet or 100 meters below the waves, they found 5 Roman ships, all in pristine condition. The vessels are trading ships dating from the 1st century BC through to the 5th century AD. This makes their immaculate presentation on the seafloor all the more incredible to believe. Researchers feel like they know what might have happened to the ships thanks to the history of the island of Ventotene itself. Ventotene, known as Pandataria in Roman times, had long been a place where ships would shelter from the bad weather of the Tyrrhenian Sea. From the looks of things, the 5 ships were attempting to do just that, but sadly they didn't make it. Archaeologists were also able to take a look at the cargo that the Roman trading ships were transporting. They found amphorae full of wine from Italian vineyards, fish sauce from Spain and North Africa, something that was the Romans' food seasoning of choice, as well as some strange metal ingots that would have likely been used to forge weapons and statues. The cargo of each of the vessels also tells a story about how Roman trade developed. Initially, in the early days of the empire, Rome would have exported its produce to its growing provinces and settlements. But at its height, it would import everything that Rome needed from far afield to support its booming population. Thankfully, the depth of these wrecks has helped to keep them in such good condition. But it's feared that as the years go on and deep water diving becomes even more popular, historical wrecks like this around the Mediterranean could be disturbed or even destroyed by divers that don't have the necessary training to be able to handle and interact with these types of sites. As a result, archaeologists are in a race against time to catalog and discover as many as they can before they're lost to treasure hunters. 2. The Lake Erie Rex. There's a body of water that has claimed more lives and vessels than the infamous Bermuda Triangle. And it might not be the one you expect. Lake Erie gets its name from the Iroquois word for a long-tailed cat, Erile honan, and much like the feline inspiration, this lake is incredibly fickle and incredibly dangerous. The waters are incredibly changeable, going from calm and glass-like to ferocious waves at a moment's notice. To add insult to injury, the shallowness of Lake Erie compared to other Great Lakes makes the waves worse and the waters much more perilous. The shallowest part of Lake Erie is the Western Basin, and incidentally, this is where most wrecks occur. While the average depth of the water across Lake Erie is around 60 feet, or 20 meters, the depth of the Western Basin is less than half of that, at 24 feet, 7 meters. Not only do ships and other vessels have to contend with the shallow water in this area, but also a large amount of rocky outcrops, shoals, and islands. One of the challenges in the region is presented by Kelly's Island, located approximately 10 miles or 16 kilometers off the coast of Sandusky. Similar to the other small islands in this area, Kelly's Island has its share of nearby wrecks. However, Kelly's Island's claim to fame is the Lake Serpent, considered by many to be the oldest confirmed shipwreck in Lake Erie, which sank in 1829 while transporting limestone. Other wrecks in the Western Basin include the Sultan, which capsized 8 miles, 12.8 kilometers northeast of Cleveland. It was ferrying grindstones to Buffalo in 1864 when it scraped across a sandbar at the mouth of the Cuyahoga River, which damaged the hull before being finished off by the relentless waves of Lake Erie while the ship began to steadily take on water. Today, its cargo of grindstones can easily be seen on the lake bed, as well as the detailing of the wooden vessel, including its railings on the deck. Due to insufficient record-keeping over the years, the precise count of shipwrecks in Lake Erie remains unknown, with estimates varying from 500 to 2,000. A project conducted by Ohio Sea Grant aimed at cataloging the lake's shipwrecks has identified 277 wrecks to date. These wrecks are scattered throughout the lake, but there is a notably high concentration of wrecks in the western region encompassing Toledo, the Erie Islands, and Cleveland. The sheer amount of wrecks in the waters of Lake Erie provides historians and archaeologists with an unparalleled window into the past. The cold, fresh water found in the Great Lakes, like Erie, helps to preserve shipwrecks, especially made out of wood, which can quickly erode in warmer conditions thanks to bacteria and salt water. This means that many of the vessels being found by scientists look like they have only just sunk, even though they are hundreds of years old. 1. The underwater locomotives of New Jersey. Just off the coast of Long Branch, New Jersey, lies a fascinating maritime mystery that has left historians and enthusiasts scratching their heads. Resting 90 feet or 30 meters beneath the ocean's surface, 2 steam locomotives have been quietly nestled on the seabed for over a century. The discovery dates back to 1985 when a scuba diver named Paul Hepler was using a magnetometer to map the ocean floor. Suddenly, he received two powerful signals, indicating the presence of something large and metallic, usually the sign that he had found the wreck of a ship. However, it became abundantly clear that it was no ordinary find. There was no trace of typical ship debris. Instead, two locomotives stood proudly in front of him, standing upright as if they were on imaginary underwater railroad tracks. The locomotives were identified as Class 222T, a rare type of engine that was typically used in rail yards rather than for transportation. Yet the question of how they ended up here remained a mystery. No historical records indicated their loss at sea, nor was there any mention of a vessel carrying locomotives that went missing. The dominant theory is that engines were en route from Boston to New York and might have accidentally pushed or washed overboard during a powerful storm. But why no one reported this at the time seems rather strange.
Number 6. The K141 Kursk. The sinking of the Oscar II class nuclear-powered submarine, Project 949A anti-submarine K141 Kursk, on August 12, 2000 in the Barents Sea, marked one of the most tragic incidents in the history of submarine disasters. The Kursk, one of the largest submarines in the Russian Navy, was participating in the Summer X exercise, the first major Russian naval exercise to take place in a decade. The submarine, with 118 personnel on board, sank to the ocean floor at a depth of 354 feet, and sadly, all crew members lost their lives. The initial events leading to the disaster began at 11:29 local time, when seismic detectors recorded a magnitude 1.5 seismic event, indicating the first explosion. 2 minutes and 14 seconds later, a much larger explosion occurred, measuring 4.2 on the Richter scale. The explosions were equivalent between 2 and 3 tons of TNT and caused catastrophic damage to the submarine. The Russian Navy's response to the accident has been widely criticized for its slow and inept handling. The crews of nearby ships felt the explosions, but the Russian Navy didn't realize the severity of the situation for over 6 hours. The submarine's emergency rescue buoy had been intentionally disabled during a prior mission, further complicating rescue efforts. In total, it took more than 16 hours to locate the Kursk, resting on the ocean floor. Over the next 4 days, the Russian Navy's attempts to attach diving bells and submersibles to the escape hatch of the submarine repeatedly failed. The response was marred by misinformation, manipulation of the public and media, and a refusal of help from nearby countries. President Vladimir Putin, initially continuing his vacation, authorized foreign assistance only after 5 days had passed. British and Norwegian divers, after 2 days of efforts, finally opened a hatch to the escape trunk, but sadly they found no survivors. The official investigation later concluded that a faulty weld in the casing of a dummy torpedo loaded by the crew leaked high-test peroxide inside the torpedo tube, leading to a catalytic explosion. This initial explosion ignited a fire, damaged multiple compartments, and incapacitated or killed the crew in the torpedo and control rooms. Subsequent explosions caused by torpedo warheads tore a large hole in the hull, resulting in the death of everyone in the front of the 6th compartment. In the aftermath, the Dutch company Mamoe was awarded a salvage contract in May of 2001. Within 3 months, the salvage team successfully raised the submarine's hull from the seabed, recovering all but the bow and the remains of the 115 sailors. The salvage revealed severe breaches of discipline, poorly maintained equipment, and negligence within the Russian Navy. The Kursk disaster brought intense criticism to the Russian government and the Navy, bringing to light stunning breaches of discipline and revealing shoddy equipment maintenance. The rescue operation was deemed unjustifiably delayed, and the Russian Navy was found completely unprepared to respond to the disaster. Number 5. B37. Soviet B37, a Foxtrot-class diesel submarine, met its untimely demise on January 11, 1962, in a catastrophic incident that claimed the lives of 122 individuals. Commissioned on November 5, 1959, it served in the Soviet Navy's Northern Fleet. On that fateful day, B37 was moored at the pier at Ekaterininsky Bay at the Polarny Naval Base. Engaged in maintenance and torpedo testing, the submarine had all watertight doors open. A fire then erupted in the torpedo compartment, believed to be triggered by the ignition of hydrogen gas when electrical equipment was activated. This incident led to the detonation of all 11 torpedoes on board, resulting in the instantaneous destruction of the submarine. Captain Second Rank Begeba, the commanding officer who was on the pier at the time, and Captain Third Rank Jakubenko, located in another part of the submarine base, were the sole survivors. Tragically, 59 B-37 crew members and 19 crew members from the adjacent submarine S-350 lost their lives. And additionally, 44 individuals from other ships and the shipyard succumbed to the explosion. The devastating blast not only claimed lives, but also inflicted severe damage to the neighboring Soviet submarine S-350. The force of the explosion was so intense that it propelled B-37's anchor just over a mile away from the dock. The incident highlighted the inherent risks associated with naval operations, especially during maintenance and testing procedures. The loss of B-37 served as a reminder of the dangers faced by submariners and naval personnel. The investigation into the explosion emphasized the importance of stringent safety protocols and procedures to prevent such tragedies in the future. Before we continue, if you're joining us for the first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button to unlock a treasure trove of incredible videos. And don't keep your thoughts to yourself. Drop a comment below and tell us what content you'd like to see next. At number 4, K129. K129, a Golf II class ballistic missile submarine that was commissioned by the Soviet Navy, embarked on a tragic journey that culminated in its sinking on March 8, 1968, approximately 1,560 nautical miles northwest of Oahu in the Pacific Ocean. The submarine, ordered on January 26, 1954, and constructed at Komsomol na Amur shipyard, had a significant role in the Cold War naval history. Assigned to the 15th Submarine Squadron of the Pacific Fleet, K129 conducted strategic ballistic missile patrols. Captain First Rank Vladimir Kobzar commanded the submarine on its final deployment, which ended mysteriously. The submarine's disappearance in 1968 echoed similar incidents involving the Israeli submarine INS Dakar, the French submarine Minerve, and the American submarine USS Scorpion. After nearly 2 weeks of silence, the Soviet Navy initiated a search for K129, deploying military aircraft and ships. Simultaneously, the U.S. Navy observed Soviet efforts and began its own search for the submarine. Contrary to Soviet expectations, the Americans accurately located the wreck's coordinates in August 1968, far from the Soviet search area. In 1974, the United States, in a covert operation named Project Azorian, attempted to recover K129 using the USS Halibut. The submarine's wreckage, situated at a depth of 16,000 feet, was surveyed in detail over 3 weeks, providing valuable intelligence. The project's cover story involved the Hughes Glomar Explorer engaging in commercial manganese nodule mining, ensuring that the salvage attempt remained secret. The recovery, though partially successful, encountered challenges. The forward half of K129 was lifted but suffered a critical failure, leading to the breaking of the sail area and the center section, which fell back to the ocean floor. The salvage section was classified, but the Soviet assumed that the US had recovered torpedoes with nuclear warheads, operations manuals, code books, and coding machines. Seymour Hersh of the New York Times uncovered details of Project Azorian in 1974, but the story was kept from publication. The next year, though, in 1975, media coverage exposed the project, leading to public awareness of the clandestine operation. The recovered section of K129 contained the bodies of 6 men, who were subsequently buried at sea with full military honors due to radioactive contamination. The causes behind K129's sinking remain debated. The Soviet Navy proposed that the submarine, operating in snorkel mode, slipped below its operating depth. Alternative theories included a hydrogen explosion in the batteries, a collision with the USS Swordfish, a missile explosion from a leaking missile door seal, or intentional or unintentional scuttling by the crew. The K129 incident, with its covert recovery attempt and ensuing secrecy, represents a fascinating chapter in Cold War naval history, As of 2018, the project's files and evidence remain classified, leaving some aspects of this underwater drama shrouded in mystery and intrigue. At number 3, S80. The Soviet submarine S80, originally a diesel-electric submarine of the Whiskey class, experienced a devastating event on January 27, 1961, resulting in the loss of all 68 crew members. This submarine, whose construction began on March 3, 1950 at the Sormovo Yard in Gorky, was commissioned into the Northern Fleet on December 2, 1952. In July 1957, the submarine underwent a significant transformation at Severodvinsk, being converted into a Project 644 Whiskey twin-cylinder guided missile submarine. This involved the installation of external launch tubes for the SSN-3 Shattuck anti-ship missiles. S80 then returned to active service in April 1959, operating in the Barents Sea. The tragedy struck the night of January 26, 1961, while S80 was snorkeling at diesel engine depths in the Barents Sea. The submarine encountered severe weather conditions, with the ocean being at sea stage 6 and the air temperature reaching 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, at 1:27 a.m. on January 27th, S80 dropped below snorkel depth, triggering the automatic snorkel valve to shut. However, the de-icing system, which was crucial for preventing ice buildup on the snorkel valve, was turned off, leading to the valve jamming with ice. The consequences were catastrophic. Seawater flooded the diesel engine's air intakes, causing immediate engine failure. A machinist in the fifth compartment responsible for addressing the flooding struggled to close the ventilation flapper quickly enough due to confusion. As the compartment filled, the submarine's trim control was lost, causing it to tilt at an angle exceeding 45 degrees. It gradually slowed, came to a stop, and then descended backward until it finally grounded. The impact crushed the second, third, and fourth compartments, leaving 24 crew members who were located in the aft compartments as the only survivors. Despite their efforts to escape using the IDA-51 apparatuses, all 68 officers and men aboard the S-80 perished. And sadly, their fate remained unknown for 7.5 years. The wreck of the S-80 was discovered on June 23, 1968, by the salvage vessel Altay, resting at a depth of 643 feet. Operation Depth was subsequently initiated to salvage the submarine. The salvage vessel Karpaty, built by the Nikolaevsk shipyard, played a crucial and pivotal role in this mission. The wreck was raised from the ocean floor on June 9, 1969, and was subsequently transported to Miss Terabisky, suspended under Karpaty. Then, on July 12, 1969, S-80 was lowered to the bottom of Zavalishyn Harbor at a depth of 167 feet. And on July 24 that same year, it was raised to the surface. A government commission led by Vice Admiral Grigory Sherdin studied the wreck and identified not only the immediate causes of the submarine's loss, but also 2 additional errors that compounded the accident. The crew's failure to shift propulsion to the electric motors and their neglect to perform an emergency ballast tank blow resulted in the tragedy endured by Soviet submarine S-80. At number 2, K278 Komsomolets. The K278 Komsomolets, known by its NATO reporting name Mike, given its designation as a Mike-class vessel, was a groundbreaking Project 685 Plavnik nuclear-powered attack submarine of the Soviet Navy. Commissioned in December of 1983, it stood out for its unique submarine depth rating, having reached an astounding depth of 3,350 feet in the Norwegian Sea in 1984. This achievement solidified its status as a remarkable vessel in the Soviet military inventory. Designed by the Rubin Design Bureau to pioneer fourth-generation Russian nuclear submarines, the K278 had a double hull, with the inner one composed of titanium, granting it an operating depth far surpassing that of contemporary American submarines. The pressure hull comprised 7 compartments, including an escape capsule, offering a safety zone in case of an emergency. Despite initial intelligence estimating its speed based on incorrect assumptions about its power source, K278 was revealed to be powered by a single OK650B-3 conventional pressurized water reactor. Tragically though, K278's operational history was cut short during its third patrol in the Arctic Ocean in 1989. A serious fire erupted in the aft compartments due to a short circuit, leading to the submarine sinking in the Barents Sea. But remarkably, the crew managed to surface and distress calls were made. However, many of them succumbed to the harsh conditions before rescue workers arrived. Out of the original 69 crew members, 27 survived, and 42 others lost their lives. The sunken submarine, lying on the floor of the Barents Sea, about 1 mile below the surface, still holds its nuclear reactor and 2 nuclear warhead-armed torpedoes. The aftermath of the incident revealed plutonium leakage from one of the torpedoes, leading to subsequent efforts to seal hull fractures and contain the radiation. The Komsomolets Nuclear Submarine Memorial Society was established to support the families of lost submariners, and annual commemorations remember those who perished. Ongoing monitoring by the Norwegian authorities ensures environmental safety, with recent expeditions noting emissions but confirming no threat to the surroundings. The legacy of K-270 remains both a technological marvel and a reminder of the sacrifices made by submariners. And at number 1, K-8. A November-class Soviet submarine called K-8 served in the Soviet Northern Fleet and tragically sank in the Bay of Biscay on April 12, 1970, with nuclear weapons on board. The submarine had a history of accidents, with a significant incident occurring in 1960 and another catastrophic event taking place in 1970. In October 1960, while operating in the Barents Sea, K-8 faced a serious challenge when a ruptured steam generator tube caused a loss of coolant accident. The crew, displaying remarkable resilience and resourcefulness, improvised a system to provide emergency cooling water to the reactor, averting a potential meltdown. However, this incident resulted in the release of large amounts of radioactive gas, contaminating the entire vessel. The crew's exposure to radiation varied, with 3 members suffering visible injuries and many others receiving doses between 1.8 and 2 sieverts. And for those of you who don't know, sieverts refers to a unit of measurement for ionizing radiation dose, with just 1 sievert being a significant amount of radiation. Now getting back to the submarine, the more devastating incident occurred during the Ocean 70 naval exercise on April 8, 1970, when K-8 experienced fires in 2 compartments simultaneously. The short circuits in compartments 3 and 7, occurring at a depth of 390 feet, led to a fire spreading through the air conditioning system, forcing the shutdown of both nuclear reactors. In response to the escalating situation, the captain initially ordered the crew to abandon the ship. However, this order was later rescinded when a towing vessel arrived. Despite the dangers, 52 crew members, including Captain Second Rank Vyacheslav Besanov, reboarded the surfaced submarine, which was set to be towed. Tragically, though, this decision marked the first loss of a Soviet nuclear-powered submarine. As the sub was being towed through the rough seas of the Bay of Biscay, 8 sailors had already lost their lives due to the compartment lockdowns aimed at preventing further flooding and fire spread. The remaining crew faced perilous conditions during 80 hours of damage control and stormy weather, resulting in the sinking of K-8. The submarine sank to a depth of 15,350 feet, approximately 260 nautical miles northwest of Spain. All hands on board perished due to carbon monoxide poisoning and the flooding of the surfaced submarine. But despite the catastrophic outcome, 73 crewmen managed to survive the ordeal. Unfortunately, though, K-8 sank with 4 nuclear torpedoes out of the 24 on board. The sinking of K-8 in the Bay of Biscay reminds us of the risks and challenges associated with submarine operations, especially when compounded by technical failures and adverse weather conditions. The loss of this Soviet submarine shed light on the complex and perilous nature of naval activities, emphasizing the importance of continuous improvement in safety protocols and technological advancements to prevent such incident from occurring again.
8. The Adriatic Sea Bombers. Located in the Mediterranean, somewhere between Italy and Croatia, the Adriatic Sea is the burial ground for 5 B-24 Liberator bombers that were lost during World War II. Over half a century later, in 2002, it was reported that the missing U.S. bomber planes were finally located in the Adriatic Sea. The B-24 Liberator was a heavy bomber that could hold a max crew of about 10 men. The bombers could also reach impressive speeds of 297 miles per hour. 478 kilometers per hour, and were equipped to hold up to 5,000 pounds, 2,268 kilograms of bombs. These were the most mass-produced heavy bombers for the war, and they played a crucial role in taking out German targets. But the B-24 is often referred to as the flying coffin, since it only has a singular entry point towards the rear section of the plane. This was the only exit available in case of an emergency, and crews claimed it was practically impossible to escape a B-24 in difficult situations. The missing bombers discovered in the Adriatic Sea were more than likely stationed at a base in Foggia, Italy, before their untimely demise. There also isn't much information available about the mission the crew was on when they disappeared. A research team from the University of Delaware and the Pentagon worked together to locate the missing planes. Joining the mission was also a group of researchers and divers from Croatia. Unmanned vehicles were sent underwater to explore 24 square miles, or 62 square kilometers, in the Adriatic for the wreckage. 3 of the B-24 bombers were found after a couple weeks of searching through the waters. The research team was lucky enough to find the plane numbers on the side of the wreckage. This was important since they could use the number to trace the plane to the soldiers who flew them. The 5 planes had a total of 23 men on board when they vanished. All of these men had been listed as missing in action for over 80 years. This find is incredible news for any surviving family members of the soldiers. They finally have the answers they've been searching for. A mission leader involved in the Adriatic Sea search was also the co-founder of Project Recover. This is an organization dedicated to finding and repatriating the 80,000 missing U.S. servicemen that have been listed as MIA dating back to World War II. The discovery of the B-24 Liberator bombers was the biggest find made by Project Recover. With this success, they're continuing their mission and are working on multiple projects around the globe. Groups like Project Recover work hard to solve mysteries regarding missing planes, ships, and soldiers, and we salute their hard work. 7. The Whale Graveyard. It was 2022 when a Swedish underwater photographer named Alex Dawson made an incredible discovery. It allowed him to take a once-in-a-lifetime picture. So, what did he find? Dawson stumbled upon a whale graveyard. He and a scuba companion explored an area called the Skinning Grounds, right off the coast of Greenland. At one time, Inuit hunters in Greenland hunted the minke whale to survive. These whales can grow as long as 35 feet or 10.6 meters and weigh around 20,000 pounds, 9,100 kilograms. The Inuit people skinned the whales down to their bones, which were then taken by the water during high tide. The bones in this image were about 15 to 20 feet under the water's surface. Dawson had to put his safety to the test in order to snap his picture. He spent over an hour under ice that was roughly 3 feet, 1 meter thick. To get to that spot, he had to maneuver himself through an extremely narrow hole in the ice. He and his companion found the remains of about 20 whales. Dawson was surprised to see the whale bones at that depth. Many whale graveyards are found at a depth of 5,000 feet, 1,500 meters. This discovery is incredibly fascinating, but undoubtedly creepy. 6. The Golden Egg. A mysterious specimen that resembled a golden egg was found deep in the waters of the Pacific Ocean near Alaska. It was located when ocean researchers were using remotely operated underwater vehicles. The item was eventually retrieved and brought back up to the surface. At this point, researchers noticed the golden egg-like specimen was 4 inches, 10 centimeters in diameter, and had a slight tear at the bottom. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, later released a statement about the item. They said, "While we were able to collect the golden orb and bring it onto the ship, we still are not able to identify it beyond the fact that it is biological in origin." They also noted that their scientists were still theorizing what it could possibly be. They added that guesses ranged from a dead sponge attachment to coral to an egg casing. At the time this video was released, the item has yet to be identified. A spokesperson for the NOAA said, "New species have the potential to reveal new sources for medical therapies and vaccines, food, energy, and other societal benefits and knowledge." The specimen and the information they were able to gather about it is very important. Discoveries like this are common, and it will take some time for researchers and scientists to study their findings and deliver detailed reports. Whatever they were able to uncover is absolutely amazing. 5. Wreck of the Hiron Ton. In October 1923, the Hiron Ton, a steel bulk freighter, sank in Lake Superior near Whitefish Point. That's a spot near the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Ontario, Canada. It was October 2023, 100 years later, when it was reported that the shipwreck was located in an 800-foot, 244-meter hole at the floor of Lake Superior. So what happened to the ship? On October 11, 1923, the Hiron Ton and its crew of 17 were traveling on Lake Superior. The ship measured under 240 feet, 73 meters in length, and was not loaded with any cargo. The crew was having a difficult time navigating the waters thanks to poor visibility. Fog was also an issue, but something else made the visibility awful. There was smoke from nearby fires which carried across the lake. Also on Lake Superior at this time was the 416-foot, 127-meter long Cetus. It was reported that the Hiron Ton and the Cetus were traveling at excessive speeds. This resulted in the two ships crashing, which did considerable damage to the Hiron Ton. A hole was ripped open on the Hiron Ton, and the situation grew dire for the crew as the ship started to sink. The Cetus crew quickly sprung into action and lent a hand. All 17 members of the Hiron Ton's crew were placed on the Cetus. At some point, someone noticed that an important member of the crew was missing. It was the ship's bulldog. After realizing this, one man from the Hiron Ton jumped off the Cetus to board the sinking ship and find the bulldog. Thankfully, the dog was rescued. It took the Hiron Ton just 18 minutes to fully sink. The ship was eventually found when a local historical society searched the lake for the wreck. What's amazing about this discovery is that it was just 3 miles, 4.8 kilometers, from where the star of our next story, the Edmund Fitzgerald, sank in 1975. What's your favorite ocean or lake to visit? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. 4. The Edmund Fitzgerald. One of the most infamous shipwrecks in Great Lakes history was the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald on November 10, 1975. 29 men's lives were taken as the ship sank into the frigid and unforgiving waters of Lake Superior. The incident happened somewhere northwest of Whitefish Point, Michigan during a horrific storm. The sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald actually inspired a popular song by the Canadian singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot. The ship was commissioned by the Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company and cost about $8 million to build. It was named after Edmund Fitzgerald, Northwestern Mutual Life's president. In June 1958, the Edmund Fitzgerald was christened in Detroit. It measured 729 feet, 222 meters, and was the largest ship on the Great Lakes for its time. Unfortunately, things didn't go well at launch. The boat rolled violently when it first hit the water. Spectators were actually almost hit by a giant wave, and one man even suffered a fatal heart attack. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a mighty ship for the Great Lakes. It was the biggest vessel to sail the waters until 1971. The ship's final mission took place on November 9, 1975, when it was scheduled to haul iron ore from Wisconsin to Zug Island near Detroit. While on its journey, weather conditions on Lake Superior quickly deteriorated. Gale warnings were issued, and the weather turned into a scary situation for the crew. Hurricane-force winds up to 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour, with waves reported as high as 35 feet, 10.6 meters, slammed into the mighty Edmund Fitzgerald. Another ship on Lake Superior, the Arthur M. Anderson, stayed in close contact with the Fitzgerald during the start of the storm, but lost connection around 7:10 on November 10th. A search of the lake found 2 lifeboats from the Fitzgerald, but no one inside them. A few pieces of debris were also found, leaving rescue crews with a puzzling mystery. Sadly, the Fitzgerald sank 535 feet, or 163 meters below the lake's surface. A U.S. Navy vessel was sent to the area to investigate the wreckage in May 1976. They were able to take a video and snap a few images of the sunken ship. 3. plastic at the bottom of the ocean. Victor Vesco holds an impressive record. In 2019, Vesco piloted a submarine over 35,000 feet to the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean. His record dive was 36 feet, 10.9 meters, more than what the famous Titanic director James Cameron achieved in 2012. Victor Vescovo served in the U.S. Navy and had a great career as an investor. He's only one of 70 people that have completed a challenge known as the Explorer's Grand Slam. To earn their title, one must scale the highest mountain peaks on all 7 continents. This is not an easy task, but Vescovo did it, even making a trip to the Arctic and Antarctic. Vescovo has also made dives in manned submarines in all 5 oceans. These trips have been to some of the deepest parts of the seas. His record dive was incredibly dangerous due to the darkness and pressure at that depth. When one dives to 35,849 feet, or 10.9 kilometers, the pressure is equivalent to having 50 jumbo jets placed directly on top of your body. Thank goodness Vescovo had a vessel to withstand the pressure. While the dive was a success, Vescovo was upset after discovering a plastic bag and candy wrappers at the bottom of the ocean. Although it was a great accomplishment, the discovery of the trash was heartbreaking. Currently, there's a massive garbage patch floating in the Pacific. It's about double the size of Texas and a major environmental issue. The giant waste pile is known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and has been collecting in the Pacific between Hawaii and California. 2. The November 1914 ships. On November 18, 1914, 3 ships were traveling along Lake Superior. The steamship C.F. Curtis was towing 2 schooner barges named the Selden E. Marvin and Annie M. Peterson. If you're unfamiliar with the area, November is an unforgiving time on Lake Superior, and it was especially nasty on November 18, 1914, thanks to snow and high winds. Conditions were terrible, but the ships were determined to finish their trip. At some point, all 3 ships sank, and the 28 men on board were never seen again. Although the ships went down, they weren't forgotten. At some point, the Great Lakes Historical Society decided to look for the C.F. Curtis, the Sheldon E. Marvin, and the Annie M. Peterson. The Great Lakes Historical Society wanted to figure out what happened back in 1914, so the surviving family members of the crew could have some sort of closure. The work is difficult, but the Historical Society is up to the task. In 2021, the C.F. Curtis steamship was finally located. A year later, the Marvin was found. The Peterson is the last of the 3 ships, and there are no updates at this time if it's been discovered. 1. The Key West Hospital and Cemetery. In May 2023, divers near Key West, Florida found a cemetery and the remains of a 19th century quarantine hospital that was once part of Fort Jefferson. Construction of Fort Jefferson started in 1846. Fort Jefferson was used as a place vessels traveling either the Straits of Florida or the Gulf of Mexico could dock to receive much-needed repairs or to load up on supplies. Another great feature of Fort Jefferson was that it was a nice place for those ships to seek refuge from harsh storms. Other services provided by the fort included a naval coaling outpost, lighthouse station, naval hospital, and a quarantine facility. During the Civil War, Fort Jefferson was used to house prisoners, but it was shut down as a fort in 1873. But the fort was put to use again in 1890. Before it sank into the ocean, the hospital treated patients with yellow fever from 1890 to 1900. Yellow fever is a disease spread by mosquitoes. Those infected typically experience aches, headaches, and vomiting. If not properly treated, yellow fever can lead to death. Over time, the hospital settled and eroded thanks to a variety of environmental factors. At the time this video was made, only 1 grave in the cemetery has been identified. It was for a civilian named John Greer, who passed away while serving as a laborer at the fort in 1861. Others buried at the cemetery are believed to be U.S. soldiers, but researchers are still trying to piece together exactly who was buried at Fort Jefferson. Are there any unusual discoveries you'd like us to make a future video about? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.